Senator Ted Cruz steps up and delivers one of the most powerful speeches you will ever hear on Congress's floor, and then he gets a massive standing ovation. You guys have got to check this out.
Democrats went on and on and on. The corrupt corporate media went on and on and on about kids in cages. You couldn't turn on the evening news without hearing kids in cages. What they didn't tell you is Barack Obama built those cages, and today under Joe Biden, the cages are bigger and they're more full than they were before. Mr. President, every Democrat who stood up and lamented kids in cages in the House of Representative Ocasio-Cortez has a famous photo of her grasping her head by the kids in cages. Well, I'm going to give a simple challenge for Representative Ocasio-Cortez and for every Democrat in this body. Go see the Biden cages with your own eyes. I've seen them, the Donna tent facility with over 4,000 people, with little boys and little girls on top of each other. Just a couple of weeks ago when I was in the Rio Grande Valley, the rate of COVID positivity in the Biden cages was over 22%. And all the Democrats who talked about this, if they don't go, if they don't denounce the Biden cages, then they're telling you that they're hypocrites, that they didn't believe it when they said it, that they didn't care about it when they said it, that it was all politics. It wasn't about their kids. Why does Joe Biden refuse to go to the Rio Grande Valley? Because if he goes, the TV cameras will come with him. Why does Kamala Harris, who's supposed to be the border czar, she's supposed to be in charge of this, why won't she go to the Rio Grande Valley? Because if she went, the TV cameras would come and would show the Biden cages. And the Democrats are counting on the corrupt corporate media to suddenly say, nothing to see here. 15,000 Haitians under a bridge in Del Rio, nothing to see here. Anyone want to know what Joe Biden's favorite ice cream flavor is? That's the news. Never mind 1.2 million illegal immigrants. Never mind when I took 19 senators down to the border, we went out on the river and saw a man floating dead in the river who died trying to cross illegally. Never mind the South Texas farmers and ranchers, the moms who told me, I won't let my teenage kids go out on our ranch without being armed with a loaded firearm, because there's so many human traffickers and narcotics traffickers that it's dangerous for them to go out on their own ranch. Never mind the South Texas farmers and ranchers who told me at roundtables how tired they are of going out and finding dead bodies. You want to understand what's happening? Say there's no crisis? Come to Brooks County. I invite every Democrat here to Brooks County. Brooks County in South Texas, it's just north of the border. Brooks County, over and over and over again, they're dead bodies of illegal immigrants. The traffickers who are bringing them in, they're not nice guys. They're not humanitarians. They don't give a damn. That means if one of the illegal immigrants is a pregnant woman, is a young child, is elderly, is sick, they just abandon them. They leave them in the rough terrain, in the summer heat, and over again. The farmers and ranchers encounter dead bodies on their property where the traffickers have abandoned them. Mr. President, I ask you, is that humane? Is that compassionate, the Joe Biden and Kamala Harris policy that encourages, that puts people in harm's way and results in people dying? When we were down on the border, we saw a young girl who had been gang raped by the human traffickers who had brought her to America. The rate of sexual assault is staggering, particularly among the girls and young women. So much so that a significant percentage of young women, before they take the harrowing trip with the traffickers, will implant a birth control because they know the odds of their being sexually assaulted are so great. And I'll tell you, as I was doing the roundtables, one of the things I saw also was the colored wristbands. So the traffickers are global cartels. the criminals. They're vicious criminals. They charge anyone, a young man, a young woman, a little boy, a little girl, thousands of dollars, anywhere from $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 to cross into the United States. By the way, do you know there's 100% operational control on the border? 100% on the southern side. Nobody crosses the border without the cartel's permission. If you do, they will kill you. Every person who crosses the border does so after paying the cartels, because you will be killed otherwise.
How funny is it that they call Donald Trump a racist because he wants to secure our border? He wants to know who's coming into our country to keep American citizens safe and to not drain the American people's tax dollars. That's a problem with all these humanitarian people. They see an issue with that, but they don't see an issue with the cartel ruling with an iron fist. Nobody comes into our country without our knowledge, and if so, you're dead. I don't hear any outrage about that. Meanwhile, people and drugs are being trafficked through our southern border at an exponential rate. If these so-called humanitarians cared about people so much, how come I never hear them utter a word when this happens? And they just don't care because it doesn't involve Donald Trump.
But often when they come, they'll cross and they'll end up at a stash house. I've been to those stash houses. I've been out on the midnight patrols with the Border Patrol. You go into those stash houses, and they're colored wristbands that they put on the illegal immigrants. And the colors correspond to how many thousands of dollars they paid and how many thousands of dollars more they owe. Often when they get here, the cartels will say, "Thank you for your X thousand dollars, we want Y thousand more." Tragically, at those stash houses in the United States where many of the sexual assaults occur. And so these immigrants, many of whom are young children, teenage children, when they get here, the Biden administration delivers them to their final destination. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and their administration are the last mile of the human trafficking network. But for the 14, 15-year-old boy who arrives in Atlanta, who arrives in New York, who arrives in Detroit, who arrives in Nashville, many of those 14 and 15-year-old boys owe thousands of dollars to the cartels, which means they arrive in your city. You might think Georgia is not a border state, but when teenagers are arriving in Atlanta, owing thousands of dollars to the cartels, they work for the cartels. And the cartels know who their family is and where their family is, and they risk their mother or father being murdered if they don't work for the cartels to pay off the cartels. The young women have it even worse. There are teenage girls who make the decision, I want to come to America, I want to come to the promised land. We've been a beacon of hope to millions throughout our history. They don't realize they are stepping into hell on earth. When the traffickers take them and then take them to a cartel facility in whatever city they end up in, where many of those teenage girls, still owing thousands of dollars to the cartels, have to work to pay off that debt by forced prostitution. Young girls forced into a life of sex slavery because the alternative is murder at the hand of the cartels. This is happening. The fact that Joe Biden doesn't want to talk about it, the fact that Kamala Harris claims it's not happening, the fact that the corrupt corporate media ignores it, it doesn't stop the fact that hundreds of thousands of people are suffering.
What aggravates me about all this is just the hypocrisy. How could you stand for something one day and then the next you don't give a dang? These are human lives we are talking about. And like it or not, if Trump was in charge, this stuff would not be happening because the cartel is running free and they are running wild right now. They're doing whatever the heck they want with zero repercussions. We need strong leadership to cut these people down. We cannot have them running rampant. Do you guys remember when ISIS was killing everybody under Donald Trump's administration? Well, neither do I, because he got rid of them almost immediately. He sees a terrorist organization like that, and you know what he does? He dismantles them right away. That's what we need. We need people like that in charge. Not like Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, the borders are. By just letting these people run free and destroy American lives. We cannot have this.
We're soon hijacked by opportunists and violent radicals. By early June, rioters had injured more than 700 law enforcement officers across the country and had murdered David Dorn, a retired officer who served St. Louis with honor for many years. They also damaged or destroyed countless buildings and businesses. In Minneapolis alone, rioters burned affordable housing and damaged over 400 businesses, many of them owned by African Americans, at a cost of well over $500 million in damages. In Philadelphia, police cars were set ablaze. In Seattle, rioters who damaged hundreds of buildings were granted and allowed to set up a so-called autonomous zone by local officials who all too predictably resulted in more crime, including 4 shootings that cost 2 young people their lives. The fact is, the people who took the streets because their hearts cried out for justice have become overshadowed by rioters and looters and those who cynically exploit the protest for their own evil ends. And those rioters aren't concerned about racial justice. Indeed, they're willing to make a mockery of the peaceful protest to advance their violent objectives. Their actions are profoundly racist, the rioters, as they destroy minority communities, minority businesses, and minority lives across this country. This shouldn't be complicated. Peaceful protests must be protected. Riots must be stopped. No one has a right to assault another person, to firebomb a building, to throw a Molotov cocktail into a police car. That's not exercising a constitutional right. That is terrorizing your fellow citizens. More and more, we're seeing signs that a significant portion of this violence, of this rioting, is not random. It's not spontaneous. Rather, it is coordinated and inspired by leftists, anarchist groups, groups like Antifa, that will, without shame, exploit a national tragedy to attack American buildings, American homes, and American lives. This is happening in my home state, in Austin and in Dallas. And it's happening across the country, whether in Minneapolis, Nevada City, Pittsburgh, or Toledo, to name a few. But tragically, nowhere more so than in Portland, Oregon. In Portland, Antifa and other radicals have thrown metal pipes at DHS officers and used commercial-grade lasers to try to blind them, perhaps permanently. They launched mortar-style attacks with commercial-grade fireworks. They firebombed a federal courthouse. This is not peaceful protest. This violence speaks for itself. But for good measure, in graffiti on the county courthouse, they wrote, "Until the police and ICE are abolished, we will burn this city down piece by piece." They are telling us what their demands are: to shut down and abolish the police. This violence should be universally condemned. All 100 senators ought to come together and say, don't murder your fellow citizens, don't attack police officers, protect each other's rights. Instead of seeing leaders united. We're seeing too many local officials, mayors and governors, who've made a cynical decision that it's in their partisan interest to turn a blind eye to this violence, to turn a blind eye to the law enforcement officers being attacked on a nightly basis, and even worse than that, to demonize the police officers, to throw out terms like stormtroopers and Gestapo to describe federal law enforcement officers doing their jobs. It's for that reason that I've introduced legislation called the Reclaim Act. The Reclaim Act provides that if you as an American, if you are injured, if your property is damaged, if your home is burned to the ground, if your business is looted and destroyed during a riot, as a result of a decision of political leaders to deny you police protection, that you have a federal cause of action to sue the municipality or the city that has denied you police protection and has willfully looked the other way while your life was endangered, while your home or business was burned to the ground. Denying fair protection of law enforcement is a civil rights violation for any American who is denied. Just days after George Floyd was killed, Representative John Lewis, whose passing the nation just mourned, he said, quote, "Rioting, looting, and burning is not the way. Organize, demonstrate, sit in, stand up, vote."
That right there is precisely how you're supposed to protest. Non-violence always. Because the moment that anything turns violent, it will completely discredit your movement and what you have begun. That's why they tried so hard on January 6th to make it look like such a violent thing happens. Because it completely destroys the movement. You know how much momentum we had going into that day? I mean, for goodness sake, just take a look at history. Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr. These were dignified people who were standing up for something they believed in. Martin Luther King, for instance, he had everyone dressed up in proper suits because, like it or not, the way that you dress affects how people view you and how people react to you. What we saw in 2020 was a travesty because it was all people dressed up in all black, wearing ski masks, throwing Molotov cocktails at police officers. They're burning buildings left and right. I thought they just wanted to create as much chaos as possible because it was an election year for Trump.
Representative Lewis is exactly right. We all have a right to free speech, and we should protect that right vigorously. But we should also be united in condemning political violence and condemning domestic terrorism, and understand just what is happening on the ground, what the heroic men and women of law enforcement are facing right now. It's helpful to see directly what's occurring, and there's a video that should display this now.
What baffles me the most about this whole situation is I don't understand how not one politician was held accountable. Not a single person. Every single person should be accused and sued for not protecting the USA and their best interests. They were so quick to point the finger at Donald Trump because kids were in cages. Well, it started under Obama, and it's even worse under Joe Biden. You just can't make up the hypocrisy. Why were they speaking then, but they're not speaking now? They just hate Donald Trump so much and everything that he stands for because he stands up for us. They will do whatever it takes to make him look bad. You never heard an iota about this in the news when Obama was president. There's a famous quote that this reminds me of. If you want to know who rules over you, find out who you cannot criticize. And this is the perfect representation of that for me. But I'll tell you what, these next 4 years are going to be incredibly interesting, especially the next two, because we have the House, the Senate, and the presidency. So I think a lot of legislation is going to get passed to protect the American people once and for all. Because for how many years have we been forgotten? How many years have we been looked over? It's time for that to change, and I think it's going to come January 2025. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on this down below. Do you think Donald Trump will completely decimate the cartel come his next administration? Or do you think they're going to wreak havoc like they have been for the past 4 years? Let me know. I'd love to hear that. And if you enjoyed, make sure to smash that like, comment, subscribe, and wish you guys nothing but the best. Till next time.